I've been married for 3 years now, and life's been good, comfortable, predictable. Maybe a little too predictable, if I'm being honest. It was the kind of quiet contentment you dream about, until that quiet was shattered by a single name from my wife's past. Her ex, he'd moved back to town. At first, it was nothing, just a casual mention over dinner one night. By the way, guess who's back in town? He is. We're just grabbing a coffee tomorrow to catch up. She said it so breezily, so matter-of-factly, that I almost didn't register the strange, tight knot that formed in my chest. I nodded, told her it was fine. What else could I say? It's just coffee, right? Harmless, but that knot stayed. It was a tiny seed of doubt planted in the perfect garden of our life, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was starting to grow. Days turned into a week, and that one coffee meeting became a few more. Just running into him around town, she'd say. It's a small city, you know. I wanted to believe her. I really did. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I trusted my wife. But every time his name came up, that knot in my chest tightened just a little more. It felt like an invisible string was being pulled, connecting her to a past I was never a part of, and pulling her further away from me with every mention. I started noticing little things. Her phone would light up with a text, and she'd quickly turn it over. She'd laugh at something on her screen, and when I'd ask, she'd just say, "Oh, just a funny video a friend sent." The predictability I once found comforting now felt like a fragile facade, ready to crack at any moment. Then came that Friday night. It's etched into my memory, every single detail. It was late, around 10 o'clock. The city was quiet, and the only sound in our living room was the soft rustle of pages as I read my book. My wife was on the couch, scrolling through her phone, a small smile playing on her lips. It was a typical, peaceful evening. And then, a knock. A sharp, confident rap on the front door that sounded completely out of place at this hour. I looked at my wife. She seemed just as surprised as I was. I put my book down, a sense of unease creeping over me. Who would be visiting this late without calling first? I walked to the door, my heart starting to beat a little faster. I peered through the peephole, but the angle was off, the porch light casting long shadows. Taking a breath, I turned the lock and pulled the door open. And there he was, my wife's ex, standing on my doorstep. He wasn't looking at me. His eyes were fixed over my shoulder into our home. He had this easy, confident smirk on his face, like he'd been here 1,000 times before, like he owned the place. Before I could even process what was happening, before a single word could form in my throat, I heard a gasp from behind me. My wife shot up from the couch. She didn't look at me. She didn't hesitate. She ran past me, a blur of motion, right to him. And then she hugged him, a polite, friendly hug. It was a full-on wrapped arms around him, joyful embrace. She was laughing, laughing. The sound echoed in the sudden, deafening silence of my mind. I just froze. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. My entire world seemed to slow down, narrowing to that single, impossible image. My wife in another man's arms, on our doorstep. My mind was a chaotic storm of questions. Why was he here? Why was she so happy to see him? What was happening? She finally pulled away, still smiling, her face flushed with excitement. She turned to me, her eyes bright. We were just catching up, she said, as if that explained everything. Don't be jealous, she added with a little laugh. A casual flick of her hand, as if my feelings were a silly inconvenience. Don't be jealous. The words hit me like a slap in the face. It wasn't a reassurance. It felt like a dismissal. Like she had nothing to hide because, in her mind, she hadn't done anything wrong. I wanted to scream. I wanted to yell, to demand an explanation, to tell this guy to get the hell off my property. But the words were stuck. All I could do was stare at him, at his self-satisfied grin, and then back at my wife's beaming face. I felt like a stranger in my own home. He walked in, past me, without even a glance in my direction. He moved with a casual familiarity that made my skin crawl, his presence instantly filling the room and pushing me to the fringes. My wife followed him, chattering away. "Can I get you a drink?" she asked him, already heading towards our kitchen. Our kitchen. She was offering him a drink, and in that moment, a cold, hard realization washed over me. She wasn't defending me. She wasn't trying to make me feel secure. She was defending him. She was making him feel welcome. I was the intruder here. The rest of the evening is a blur of muffled conversation and forced smiles. I sat back on the couch, picking up my book, but not reading a single word. The letters just swam on the page. I could hear their laughter from the kitchen, the clinking of glasses. It was a low, intimate murmur, the sound of shared histories and inside jokes I would never understand. I felt completely and utterly invisible. It was like watching a movie of my own life, but I was no longer the main character. I was just a background extra. Eventually, he left. I don't remember him saying goodbye to me. I just remember the sound of the front door closing again, plunging the house back into a silence that was now heavy and suffocating. My wife came back into the living room, humming a little tune. She seemed oblivious to the storm raging inside me. She acted like everything was perfectly normal. That night, I went to bed, but sleep never came. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the darkness of the room feeling as deep and empty as the pit in my stomach. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again. The knock, the door opening, her running to him, her smile, his grin. The hug. It played on a loop in my head, each replay twisting that knot in my chest tighter and tighter. I felt a profound sense of losing control, not just of the situation, but of everything I thought our marriage was. Everything I thought we had built together felt like it was crumbling into dust. The next morning, the sun came up as it always does. My wife was in the kitchen, making breakfast. The smell of coffee and pancakes filled the air, a scent that used to bring me comfort, but now it just felt like a cruel joke. She was acting completely normal. She smiled at me, asked how I slept, started talking about the errands we needed to run. It was as if last night never happened. I couldn't stand it. I had to know. I sat down at the table and asked, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. "So, what about him?" She looked up from her plate, her expression untroubled. "Oh, he left late last night," she said, taking a bite of her pancake. She chewed, swallowed, and then looked me right in the eye. "Nothing happened. Don't worry. Don't worry." There it was again. Those two simple words that were meant to soothe, but instead felt like gasoline on a fire. But I did worry. I was worried. Because I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this was far from over. This was just the beginning, and I had a terrible feeling that the life I knew was already gone. I knew I had to do something, but what? What do you do when the person you trust most in the world makes you feel like a fool in your own home? I didn't have the answer then, and I still don't, but I knew I couldn't just let this go. The story doesn't end here. Over the next week, small things started happening, little clues that something was off, you know? Things that, by themselves, didn't mean much. But when you put them all together, they painted a pretty ugly picture. There were the phone calls she'd take in the other room, whispering so I couldn't hear. Then there were the text messages, the ones she'd angle her phone away from me to read, deleting them almost instantly, and the excuses. The excuses. Suddenly, she had a lot of late meetings or girls' nights that just didn't add up. Friends I knew weren't even in town. My gut was screaming at me, telling me something was seriously wrong. I tried to ignore it. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust the woman I loved, the woman I had built a life with. But that little voice in the back of my head, it just kept getting louder and louder, impossible to ignore. I felt like I was going crazy, caught between my love for her and this growing mountain of doubt. Then came the night I broke my own rule. A few months back, I had installed a couple of security cameras in the house. I told her they were for safety, in case of a break-in, but in the back of my mind, a small, dark part of me knew they might serve another purpose one day. I never thought I'd actually use them to spy on my own wife. It felt like such a violation, a total breach of trust. I kept telling myself not to do it. Just talk to her, I thought. But how could I? What could I even say? Hey, are you cheating on me? Based on a few weird texts. She'd just deny it. Call me crazy and paranoid. I felt trapped. So, late one night, after she'd gone to sleep, I sat down at my computer, my heart pounding in my chest, and I opened the security footage. I shouldn't have. I really, really shouldn't have. But I did. And what I saw shattered my world into a million pieces. I scrolled back through the recordings, my hands trembling so bad I could barely control the mouse. I went to the day after that first strange phone call. And there it was, crystal clear. The footage showed her, my wife, opening our front door after I'd left for my night shift, and walking in was her ex. Him, the man she swore was just a ghost from her past. They talked in our living room. They laughed, he put his arm around her, and she leaned into him. Then he gave her a long, lingering hug. A hug that lasted way too long to be just friendly. My stomach twisted into a knot. But it didn't end there. I kept watching, my eyes glued to the screen, unable to look away. I watched as my wife, the love of my life, walked him down the hallway and into our guest bedroom. The door closed behind them. The camera in the living room couldn't see what happened next, but my imagination filled in the blanks in the most brutal, painful way possible. I felt the air leave my lungs. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. My heart felt like it was going to explode out of my chest. I sat there, staring at the frozen image on the screen, for what felt like hours. I was numb. It was a kind of pain I'd never experienced before. It was a physical ache, a hollowed-out feeling in my chest. All the little signs, the hidden calls, the deleted texts, the flimsy excuses, it all clicked into place. This wasn't just a one-time thing. My mind raced. How long had this been going on? How many times had he been in our house, in our home? The place that was supposed to be our sanctuary. I felt like a fool. A complete and utter fool. The worst part was, I didn't confront her right away. Part of me was in shock, unable to process what I had just seen. Another part, a colder, angrier part, wanted to wait. I wanted to gather more evidence. I wanted to be absolutely, undeniably certain. I needed to plan this. I couldn't let my emotions get the best of me. Not yet. So I pretended. I went to bed, lying next to her, feeling the warmth of her body, and all I could see was the image of her with him. It was pure torture. The next few days were the longest of my life. I went to work. I came home. I played the part of the loving husband. I'd kiss her hello, ask about her day, all while this poison was eating away at me from the inside. She acted completely normal. She smiled at me, laughed at my jokes, held my hand. It was sickening. She was living a double life, and I was the clueless idiot playing my part. I watched the camera footage every day, and every day it was the same story. He'd show up not long after I left for work. Sometimes they'd stay in the living room. Sometimes they'd disappear into the guest room. I saved every video. I took screenshots. I built my case, piece by painful piece. With every clip I watched, the love I had for her was slowly being replaced by a cold, hard anger. The betrayal was so deep, it felt like it had rewritten our entire history. Every shared memory, every laugh, every promise now felt like a lie. Finally, Friday came. I decided that was the day. The day the lies would end. I told her I had to work late, a classic excuse from her own playbook. I waited in my car down the street, watching my heart, a heavy stone in my chest. Just like clockwork, his car pulled up. He went inside. I waited an hour, letting the anger and hurt build up inside me, fueling what I had to do. Then I drove home. I walked in, making sure to make some noise. She greeted me at the door with a bright smile and a kiss. "Hey, honey, you're home late," she said, her voice so casual, so innocent. It was the most convincing performance I had ever seen. For a second, I almost faltered. But then I remembered the videos. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her, and my expression must have told her something was wrong, because her smile faded. I walked past her to the coffee table and put down an envelope. She looked at me, confused. "What's this?" she asked. I just nodded towards the envelope. "Open it." Her hands were a little unsteady as she picked it up and tore it open. She pulled out the contents. It was a stack of photos, screenshots from our security cameras. A picture of her letting him in. A picture of them hugging. A picture of them walking towards the guest room. I watched her face as she looked at them. All the color drained from it. She went completely pale. Her eyes were wide with a mix of shock and terror. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked up at me, her expression crumbling. She tried to speak, to form some kind of defense. "It's not what you think," she stammered. But I cut her off. I held up my hand, my voice low and dangerously calm. No explanations, no excuses. I want the truth. Everything, right now. She just crumbled. It was like watching a dam break. The tears started streaming down her face, and she sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. The sobs racked her whole body. For a moment, a tiny part of me felt a flicker of pity, but the anger quickly extinguished it. After a few minutes, she looked up at me, her face a mess of tears and mascara. And she admitted it. She told me everything. Her ex had been visiting multiple times over the past 2 weeks. He'd reached out, saying he missed her, and she had agreed to see him. She tried to justify it, of course. "It was just catching up," she cried. "We were just talking. Nothing happened, I swear." But I just stared at her. The words were meaningless. Even if, by some miracle, nothing happened physically, it didn't matter. He was in our house. She lied to me, repeatedly. She hid it from me. She broke the most fundamental part of our marriage. The truth was clear, and it was a truth that couldn't be unsaid or unseen. The trust was gone, completely and irrevocably shattered. And I knew, standing there in our living room, surrounded by the wreckage of her lies, that our marriage was over. There was no coming back from this. What happened next was a blur of anger, tears, and a whole lot of shouting. But we'll get into all of that in the next part of the story. The confrontation was just the beginning of a long and messy end. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss how it all went down. Thanks for listening. The next 2 days were a blur. A haze of confusion, anger, and a deep, gut-wrenching sadness. Every corner of our apartment, every object, every shared memory was now tainted. The life I thought we were building together suddenly felt like a house of cards, teetering on the edge of collapse. I replayed her words over and over in my head. He's just an old friend. The casualness of the lie was what hurt the most. It wasn't just about him being there. It was the deliberate deception. The complete disregard for my feelings, for our trust. How could she look me in the eye and lie so effortlessly? Was this the first time? How many other old friends were there? My mind spiraled, creating scenarios, each one more painful than the last. I barely ate. I couldn't sleep. I'd just lie there, staring at the ceiling, the silence of the night amplifying the storm in my head. I felt like a stranger in my own home, in my own life. I thought about all the moments we shared, the laughter, the inside jokes, the promises we made. Were any of them real? Or was I just a character in a play she was directing? The betrayal felt like a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I knew I couldn't stay. I couldn't pretend everything was okay. Staying would mean accepting the lie, condoning the disrespect. It would mean telling myself that I wasn't worth the truth, and I couldn't do that. I had to choose myself, even if it meant walking away from the person I loved. So I started to plan. It wasn't a grand, dramatic escape. It was a quiet, methodical packing of my life into boxes. Each item I touched a book she gave me. A photo of us smiling, a stupid souvenir from a trip, was a fresh stab to the heart. I moved like a robot, on autopilot, because if I stopped to think, to feel, the pain would paralyze me. I found a small apartment on the other side of town, a place with no memories, no ghosts. It was a blank slate, a place where I could start to rebuild piece by piece. The thought of being alone was terrifying, but the thought of staying in that house, suffocating in the betrayal, was even worse. This wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. Friday night came, the day I had marked on my calendar as my Independence Day. I walked through the door for what I knew would be the last time. My bags were already in the car, waiting. The apartment was quiet. She was on the couch, scrolling through her phone, probably not expecting anything. When she saw me, she looked up, a question in her eyes. "You're home late," she said, her voice casualness. It was that same casualness that had broken me. I took a deep breath, the air thick with unspoken words. This was it. The final scene. I had to stay calm. I had to see this through. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't want to fight. What was there to fight about anymore? The battle was already lost. I looked at her, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the woman I fell in love with. But it was just a ghost. "Where are you going with those bags?" she asked, a hint of confusion turning into alarm as she finally noticed the packed suitcases by the door that I had brought in from the car. I met her gaze, my own voice steady, devoid of the emotion that was raging inside me. "I'm going somewhere I can breathe," I said, the words hanging in the air between us. Somewhere I can breathe without the taste of betrayal in every breath. Her face crumpled. The mask of indifference fell away, revealing panic. She jumped up from the couch, her phone clattering to the floor. "What are you talking about? Don't be ridiculous." She tried to laugh it off, a nervous, high-pitched sound that didn't reach her eyes. But I didn't waver. I just stood there, my hand on the doorknob, my resolve hardening with every second. She rushed towards me, trying to block the door, trying to grab my arm. "Please, don't do this. We can talk about this. We can fix this." Her voice cracked. The begging started. The pleading. It was the desperate sound of someone realizing they've gone too far, that their actions have consequences they can't control. I noticed he wasn't there. He was gone. He must have sensed the storm brewing, the inevitable end of his little vacation. Or maybe she told him to leave, hoping to clean up the mess before I came home for good. It didn't matter. The damage was done. The trust was shattered into a million pieces, and no amount of glue could ever put it back together again. "He's gone," she said, as if that would change anything. "He left this morning. It was a mistake. I know it was a mistake. Please, just stay. Let's talk." But there was nothing left to say. I had already said it all to myself over the past 2 agonizing days. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind a cold, hard emptiness. I didn't even cry. The tears were for later, for the lonely nights in my new, empty apartment. Right now, all I felt was a strange sense of clarity, a quiet determination. I gently removed her hand from my arm. "It's too late for that," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of finality. I looked at her one last time, memorizing the face of the person who taught me the hardest lesson of my life. And then I turned around and walked out the door, closing it softly behind me. I didn't look back. Weeks turned into a month. The silence from my end was deafening. She called. She texted. The messages ranged from angry and accusatory to desperate and pleading. I read some of them. Then I started deleting them without opening them. Each notification was a phantom limb, an ache for something that was no longer there. I didn't answer a single call. Talking to her would be like reopening the wound, and I was trying so hard to let it heal. I heard through a mutual friend that her ex had moved back to his hometown, his visit officially over. The game was up. And now she was alone, facing the consequences of her choices. She tried to reconcile, showing up at my new apartment unannounced one evening. Seeing her on my doorstep sent a jolt through me, a mix of old affection and fresh pain. She'd been crying. She said all the things I once longed to hear. That she was sorry, that she loved me, that she made the biggest mistake of her life. But the words felt hollow now. They were just words. Her actions had spoken so much louder. The choice to lie, the choice to disrespect our relationship, those were her choices. And now the choice was mine. And I had already chosen myself. I had chosen peace. I had chosen my own sanity. Sometimes life throws you a curveball you never see coming. You can love someone with every fiber of your being, but you can't control their choices. You can't make them love you back the way you deserve to be loved. You can't make them be honest. The only thing you have control over is your own reaction. The only power you have is to decide what you will and will not accept. And when someone shows you that you are not their priority, the bravest and most powerful thing you can do is to walk away. It's the ultimate act of self-love. It hurts like hell, but it's a clean break. It's choosing a future where you can be happy, even if it means walking that path alone for a while. And that's exactly what I did. I walked away, and I never looked back. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you've ever been through something similar, know that you're not alone. And choosing yourself is always the right answer. Please like this video if it resonated with you, and subscribe for more stories about navigating life's challenges. See you next time.